Ну, снимаю туда. Ой, блядь.
This is the moment when Ukraine's Neptune missiles, with a range of 1,000 kilometers, struck the Taganrog military airbase and aircraft repair facilities on the night of November 29th. In the same minutes, hundreds of kilometers to the south, the Afipsky refinery was engulfed in flames.
Да. О, боже.
But these were not isolated attack waves. This week was a complete disaster for Russia. Two 95 MS strategic bombers, secret weapons programs and repair factories were destroyed in Taganrog. On the other side, Iskander and Caliber cruise missiles were exploding in mid-air launch after seconds. These were the doomsday weapons, expected to bring the rest of the world to its knees. But today, all those threats are exploding in Putin's face. What happened in Russia this week is not unrelated. There is a direct, deadly link between them all, a terrible math that shakes Putin's nuclear doctrine and its civilian and military basics. And this triggers an incredible chain reaction. First, let's look at the anatomy of this destructive reaction, the fire on the ground. The Taganrog airfield and military complex was the last stronghold where Putin's famous nuclear triad airborne component, the Tu-95s and A-50 spy planes, were modernized. It was also the only facility where the experimental A-60 was produced. Putin set this facility in years, but Ukraine destroyed this capability with Neptune missiles in just 1 week. But destroying bombers and airfields or repair bases is not enough. It's also necessary to ensure they cannot fly. This is precisely where Afipsky comes in.
Да.
This is no ordinary oil terminal. It is the main fuel artery for the southern flank of the Russian army. This facility produces the special fuel that powers the engines of those strategic aircraft and cruise missiles. Ukraine has struck it 8 times, and the latest reports confirm that the facility's technical equipment is devastated. If Afipsky is on fire, the planes in Taganrog stay grounded. If Afipsky is on fire, the ships in the Black Sea are trapped in port. The equation is simple. No repairs, no fuel, no flights. Here is the proof of this equation. Novorossiysk port. Russian ships are firing Caliber missiles, but the missiles explode in the air and rain down on Russian civilians. Why? Because there is no quality fuel to power that missile. However, the fire was not confined to land. The war spread to the sea. Look, these images are the most recent images released by the SBU of one of the latest attacks on the port of Novorossiysk.
It's going here, look here. It's going right here. You see, it's dropped a lot now.
Now, Russia's largest gateway to the Black Sea, the port of Novorossiysk, is completely locked down. But that wasn't enough. The logistics supporting Putin's nuclear doctrine and its civilian and military foundations had to be cut off in 2 routes. To achieve this, the war spread beyond the Black Sea to the waters off Turkey. The tankers Kairos and Virat, belonging to the Shadow Fleet, were hit off the coast of Kandera, Turkey. These ships were carrying oil that financed Putin's war economy. Russia's secret trade routes were decrypted and destroyed. Air power paralyzed, maritime trade sunk. The stage was slowly being set, and its effects were already becoming evident. So, what about the projects Putin called weapons of the future? The situation there is even more dire. Remember the RS-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile that Vladimir Putin has been marketing for years as unstoppable and capable of bringing about the end of the world? Well, that doomsday weapon exploded on the launch pad just a few days ago. Is this a coincidence? No. The bombing of the factories in Taganrog and the explosion of this missile are symptoms of the same disease. The name of this disease? Lack of resources and technological decline. And it's not just nuclear missiles. Russia's legendary Baikonur Space Center, which once carried humanity into space, the launch pads are collapsing due to neglect. Can you see the connection? An industry that cannot produce fuel in Afipsky or repair aircraft in Taganrog certainly cannot launch the world's most complex nuclear missile. Moscow is throwing all its money, all its engineers, all its fuel into that endless meat grinder on the Ukrainian front. What's left? Untested missiles, neglected launch pads, and shattered dreams. Putin's nuclear blackmail melted away amid the flames of Novorossiysk, Taganrog, and Afipsky. All he has left is dangerous scrap metal exploding on his own soil. The repercussions of this military and technological collapse on civilian life and the Russian front lines are far more brutal. Putin is spending money to feed the army, but Ukraine is preventing that money from turning into fuel. Each attack increases the amount of money Russia has to spend on repairs, halts production, and causes chaos in the supply chain. According to Reuters, Russia is trying to use idle refinery capacity to compensate for this drone damage. This shows that the logistics system is being pushed to its limits. This is the fuel component of Russia's industrial cannibalism operation. The war industry attracts engineers and workers from the civilian sector with higher salaries, while also consuming the civilian sector's fuel. So, what happens when fuel shortages occur? The civilian population has to pay. These attacks are hurting even the people of Crimea, one of Putin's most loyal regions. In September 2025, gasoline was rationed in Russian-controlled Crimea. A distribution model limited to 20 liters per person was implemented. However, these temporary band-aid solutions are deepening the crisis rather than calming it and fueling public anger. Drivers have set up special groups on platforms such as Telegram and WhatsApp to communicate with each other. In these groups, whispers such as, "A tanker has pulled up at such and such station, they're giving out 20-liter ration cards here," spread instantly. Hundreds of vehicles rush to these spots in a state of panic. However, most of the time, this rush ends with empty pumps and cardboard signs saying, "No gasoline!" Some desperate drivers are willing to travel hundreds of kilometers to neighboring regions in the hope of finding cheaper and perhaps available fuel. However, this often serves no purpose other than to consume the last of the fuel in their tanks. Thousands of Crimeans, whose access to gasoline has been halted, are resorting to illegal actions, even going so far as to steal gasoline from cars at night. The crisis is not limited to Crimea. It is spreading like cancer throughout the entire South Russia region. In Russia's southern federal district, which includes Crimea, more than 220 stations, or 14.2% of the total, have reportedly suspended sales. While Putin brandishes a nuclear sword against the West, his own people cannot fill their cars with gasoline. This is where the difference in perspective between Putin and the people is most acute. Putin's propaganda. We are fighting against the West, our people are safe. The Russian people's reality. The factory where our president's warplanes are repaired is being destroyed. Our nuclear missiles are exploding in the air, and missile fragments are falling on our apartment buildings. We are forced to flee to shelters, and we can't find gasoline. This situation creates feelings of anger and betrayal in the mind of an ordinary Russian citizen. The war Putin started to maintain his own power is now damaging his own people's homes. This is as devastating a psychological blow as the funerals of soldiers at the front, perhaps even more so. Because a soldier who dies at the front can be declared a hero by propaganda, but a missile fragment falling on one's home is the bitter reality of an ordinary life. Propaganda cannot cover this up. Furthermore, this chain of attacks is putting pressure on Putin's military command structure. Without facilities, there is no modernization. Without modernization, Russia's Su-34s, Su-35s, and strategic bombers become blind and deaf targets against the modern air defense systems and F-16 that the West has provided to Ukraine. Commanders will have to dismantle other aircraft to keep the ones they have flying. This will rapidly erode the fleet's total combat capacity and force commanders to report to Putin that we have no aircraft left to fly. The loss of the facility will push the already tense relationship between Putin and his generals to breaking point. The generals will blame the air defense units and the FSB, which are responsible for protecting the facility. The FSB, in turn, will accuse the generals of incompetence or failing to prevent sabotage. This game of mutual recrimination will paralyze the decision-making mechanism. Putin is a results-oriented leader. The loss of the facility undermines his strategic deterrence plans. This failure could result in the purge of top commanders. A general who fears purges avoids taking risks, does not take initiative, and focuses only on protecting his seat. This spells disaster on the battlefield. Herd mentality comes into play here. When pilots and technical crews in a fleet realize they are being sent on missions in flying coffins, they begin to refuse to fly. This is not an open rebellion, but passive resistance based on technical reasons. The chain of attacks that plunged the Kremlin into chaos has gone beyond being a simple military action. These attacks show us how the Ukrainian army has evolved technologically and tactically. They are now targeting not only the front line, but Russia's strategic depth. This depth is the area where Putin feels secure. While Ukraine waits for the West's modern F-16 missiles or long-range ATACMS missiles, it is crippling Russia with its own domestically produced and developed systems. This is a war of names: Neptune, Bars, Piclo, Flamingo, and other domestically produced long-range UAVs and missiles. Thanks to these systems, Ukraine has encircled Russia's entire southern backbone, from Taganrog to Afipsky and Novorossiysk. What does this mean? While Ukraine is fighting a classic war of attrition with hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the front lines, it is simultaneously conducting a crippling operation in the strategic rear. The goal is to eliminate Russia's ability to provide logistical and technological support to the front lines. This asymmetric warfare is bringing Russia's massive and cumbersome military-industrial complex to its knees with small, agile, and intelligent technology. Russia's air defense systems are completely failing to stop these small, low-profile UAVs. Moreover, Ukraine is achieving these crippling attacks with almost no US support. Ukraine has proven that it can destroy Russia's strategic depth with its own technology. While the US delays large-scale aid packages due to internal political debates, Ukraine has sent a message to the world with these attacks. We will continue to fight, even with our own strength. This increases the pressure on US and European leaders to provide support. Europe will begin to allocate more funds to Ukraine's local, cost-effective, and technologically asymmetric solutions. This is not just military aid, but a strategic partnership integrating Ukraine into the West's military-industrial base. This will guarantee that Ukraine can sustain Russia's suffocation in the future by strengthening its own defense industry. Military successes will accelerate the strategic chess game in the diplomatic and economic spheres. Seeing the momentum Ukraine has gained on the ground, Europe will deepen its plans to transfer the interest income or principal of frozen Russian assets directly to Ukraine. This is a diplomatic trap that hits Russia with its own money. The strike on the aircraft modernization facility in Taganrog will push Europe to aggressively expand sanctions against Russia's aviation and space industries. Putin miscalculated at the start of the war, assuming Western support would soon end and Ukraine would collapse. However, Ukraine has advanced so much with its own technology that it has even managed to reduce its dependence on Western aid. Do you know what this means? Putin assumed the war could only be won on the battlefield and with Western support. In fact, Ukraine is trying to win the war with technological intelligence and strategic patience by collapsing Russia's own logistical and technological centers. This is a strategy that destroys all of Putin's war plans and all of his propaganda narrative. Now let's see how this destructive chain reaction connects to Russia's most fearful period, the winter prophecy. Russia is entering the winter of 2026, facing one of the most challenging periods in its history due to this chain of strategic failures. By refusing to accept ceasefires and fueling the war, Putin has brought his country to the brink of social explosion this winter. We have already seen how Putin's war economy ambitions have devoured the Russian civilian economy. Now, this cannibalism, combined with the cold of winter, is becoming deadly. Constant attacks on refineries like Afipsky are crippling not only the army, but also the civilian fuel supply, which is vital for heating during the winter months. If gasoline is rationed in Crimea, it is only a matter of time before fuel shortages spread to the depths of Russia. Russian central bank governor Elvira Nabulina's decision to keep interest rates at astronomical levels to curb inflation is suffocating the real sector and the civilian economy. This, in turn, is causing a decline in the food on the Russian people's tables. If a father cannot buy milk for his child, that father's loyalty to Putin will be shattered like an exploding Sarmat missile. Putin has broken his promise of prosperity and stability to his civilian population with his own hands. The war is forcing the Russian people to face the reality that they will have less to eat and less to heat their homes with. The group hardest hit by the crisis is Putin's core support base of the past 20 years, state-dependent industrial workers and public employees. They are now experiencing the hidden unemployment regime. Putin admitted in August 2025 that the number of workers at risk was around 200,000. But just 2 months later, his own Ministry of Labour revised that figure to over 254,000. This figure is not just a statistic. It means hundreds of thousands of Russian families who have lost their income and cannot even receive unemployment benefits. This means that those repairing Tu-95s in Taganrog, those building tanks at Uralvagonzavod, in other words, Putin's most loyal base, have been betrayed. This winter, these people will have to fight both the cold and an empty pot in their homes. The Kremlin may ban the word recession, but they can never ban the sound of hunger and cold. The strategic bankruptcy chain and the risk of internal social explosion are also deeply affecting Putin's biggest allies, namely the elites and oligarchs. The war reaching Russia's depths is now unsettling not only ordinary people, but also those around the Kremlin. For them, Russia's strategic depth is the last bastion protecting their money and their lives. The confession of Alexei Chadayev, a former parliamentary advisor close to Putin, is the clearest sign of this panic. Just like in the forgotten days of the 1990s, we are seeing the return of barter agreements. This means that confidence in the value of the ruble has evaporated. The elites see that Putin's promise of stability has reverted to the misery of the 1990s. Putin's 25-year contract has evaporated. This winter will not just be a war on the front lines for Russia. It will be a period of social explosion on the brink, inevitable economic suffocation, and the elites making panic escape plans. Putin is forced to pay the price for his own arrogance, his failed nuclear threats, and his betrayal of his own people with a massive strategic and social collapse. The real cost of this crisis is the price the Russian people will have to pay in the cold of winter because of the lies Putin told them. Russian President Vladimir Putin will choose either helplessness or frenzied retaliation against this chain of humiliating and simultaneous disasters. This is the moment of panic just before the collapse of the regime. Putin's first reaction, as always, will be to distort reality and ramp up propaganda. However, these claims will be instantly debunked by OSINT analysts' visuals. This situation, under the theme of the collapse of the home front, will push Putin to maximize pressure. A witch hunt will begin, spreading panic and distrust among the military and elites, increasing the risk of mutiny. The most dangerous and expected retaliation is the destructive attacks on Ukraine's critical civilian infrastructure, reaching their peak during the winter months. Russia will target thermal power plants, power lines, and water supply systems to create chaos among the masses. This is retaliation against Ukrainian attacks that bring the war physically and psychologically to Russia's heart. The failure of Sarmat, which wiped out Putin's strategic nuclear shield, makes it likely that Putin will aggressively escalate his threat to use tactical nuclear weapons to be taken seriously internationally. This is a diplomatic chess move that will push the West to the highest point of tension. In short, Putin is paying the price for his strategic mistake of rejecting the ceasefire with fear and distrust in the eyes of his own people and allies. This winter, the catastrophe awaiting the Moscow government will be not only military, but also social and political. And all this success is happening thanks to Ukraine's technological asymmetry, achieved through its own ingenuity, even without US support. This situation has reduced Putin to the position of a leader who has completely lost control in the eyes of his own allies and his own people. The truth can no longer be suppressed. The Russian people are seeing the truth, and this is the beginning of the end for Putin. Thank you for watching. Stay with PPR Global, because you can only find the truth here.